Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show on 670 The Score. Dan Wiederer is from the Chicago Tribune covering the Bears, back from Detroit after the Bears, eighth loss of the season, 3-8 now after 31-26 loss to the Lions on Sunday. And a day later, it doesn't look any prettier or easier to understand.
First of all, you said back from Detroit, which for me is a victory today because I was just telling Studs before we came on, 9 hours door to door for me from the hotel room in Detroit to this podcast here that we're recording now at a 5-hour flight delay, David, in Detroit. So I volunteer myself up for Omaha Productions. If Netflix wants to do a series called Beat Reporter, they can follow around the glamorous life of the Beat Reporter and see where it goes.
Veteran tip, although you are a veteran, when in doubt, when in fear of those when the flight delay is longer than the actual process of door to door, then maybe you should consider driving.
Thought about it. Actually thought about renting a car when the delay time kept ticking upwards. There were no cars available that you could pick up at the Detroit airport and drop off at O'Hare. So that becomes a big problem, so now you got to juggle those. Like I say, this is something that the masses would be truly interested in following. Excuse me, I'm choking on the air as we do this. But yeah, no, we're here. We're go ahead.
As you recall this, going from New Orleans through Dallas to Chicago, and now a 5-hour flight delay. Who's making your arrangements? Luke Getsy?
Listen, that's low blow and that's cold. The New Orleans one was uncontrollable. This one, just an unfortunate sea of events, unfortunate chain of events here.
I hear you.
And like part of the problem, these division road games are supposed to be the easiest to get back from. It's, right. 45 minutes you're back. And with the time change from Detroit, you basically gain time. It's one of those magic solutions. Not quite the case today, but to your benefit, I'm kind of wired and like hyper, so it's going to make this a great day after podcast to discuss another collapse by the Bears. Obviously,
yeah, it is. I'd like to say I missed those travel situations, but I don't really. All right, so you did get back in time. You do know what Matt Eberflus had to say at the podium, and as we get into that, we'll start addressing those things in our opening drive.
Hey, David.
So Matt Eberflus had a lot to say, but he didn't say a lot, if that makes sense. And I think at 3-8, the focus starts to shift to his job security and maybe his qualifications for the job itself. And I wonder if we're going to spend the next 6 games kind of debating that. And I do wonder where this is all going. It's hard for me to look at the positives that come out of this, even though that was what DJ Moore, when we talked to him on the Mully and Haugh Show, kind of said he was going to do. And that's what we hear from Justin Fields after the game. I think I want to understand better, at 3-8 for a regime that has yet to win back-to-back games, it's difficult to continue to look at the positives when you have a game that got away from you in the manner that one did.
3-8, 6-22 over 2 seasons, winless in the division, yet to put together a 2-game winning streak. 2-11 in one-score football games. There's a lot of mounting evidence that tells you that this team is not capable of meeting game-on-the-line moments like happened again Sunday in Detroit. It's problematic. It's worrisome. You have to start assigning accountability for some of these breakdowns and these malfunctions. We can't spend 3 seasons talking about a team trying to figure out how to finish with focus on individual technique and then group technique and then the full team technique. Like, go finish a game. Like, I sit in my hotel room in Detroit on Sunday night and I watch the Denver Broncos, who came here to Chicago a month ago completely reeling. They're not a very good football team. They've finished off about 4 games here in the last month with comparable talent to what the Bears are playing with. But guess what? They've got a superior coach in Sean Payton on the sideline who's getting things done in crunch time. They got a quarterback in Russell Wilson who made a couple plays on Sunday night. But, like, you know what I mean? Like, David, you can go down the standings of all these NFL divisions and find teams that aren't very good that are finding ways to finish games. The New York Giants, for God's sakes, won a football game with Tommy DeVito at quarterback.
Well, and that's why Matt Eberflus was hired, frankly. I mean, that was the promise that was implied. You get a guy that is the defensive head coach and talks like, the football coachiest of coaches, and this is somebody that's going to do more with less. And this is somebody who's going to be the ideal coach as you kind of reshape your roster and replenish your talent. And what we haven't seen is that. We haven't seen him win the game that nobody gave him a chance to win, or be the team that the league is talking about on Monday morning because they went into a hostile place like Ford Field and beat a playoff team. And that's the biggest disappointment. So there are a lot of areas to we could go in a lot of directions, but I want to start with this, and we'll get into the breakdown of Justin Fields' game and what that may or may not mean.
Yeah.
But I want to ask about something that came out of the podium session Monday at Haugh when Matt Eberflus was asked about Montez Sweat playing. I think it was 63% of the snaps.
39 out of 62. Yeah, 63% is correct.
And his answer was pertained to something to the effect of, well, platoon and keeping them fresh, and these are the kind of things that are by design. Now, I've never rushed a passer in an NFL game, and I think a lot of us don't have an appreciation for maybe what that takes. But I do think that 63% of the snaps is a little bit low for somebody who is of Montez Sweat's stature in the NFL. And I don't know how much it compares to the rest of his time, but I'm digressing. So Montez Sweat's usage raised an eyebrow. The fact that it comes in the same season not that long ago to where I was going on a silly rant about DJ Moore, keeping himself off the field or being off the field with 3rd and 4, one of the biggest plays of the game. I think
New Orleans. Yeah, it was in New Orleans
against the Saints. Yesterday, I had similar questions about Dan Feeney being in there with, what's going on with the snap count or delay of game and the quarterback's yelling at him. Why was he snapping the ball when you do have somebody, even though you're disappointed in Cody Whitehair, he's made 117 starts. He's unlikely to be fazed by the crowd noise in Detroit. I don't know if that makes sense. Then one of the biggest plays of the game, Justin Fields, who I love the call, I've said that, is thrown deep to Tyler Scott, who couldn't, for whatever reason, catch up to the ball or make the play. Why is he throwing to Tyler Scott? Why isn't that guy Darnell Mooney? My point is this. If we're going to look at all these personnel situations, what do they have in common? Coaches put players in situations to succeed. They got to be the right players, and they got to be an awareness that maybe, how do you use Montez Sweat? Is Tyler Scott the guy you want to throw to there? What's Dan Feeney doing that Cody Whitehair can't? I have all kinds of questions, and when you're 3-8, those questions only become more magnified.
I have much less of an issue with the Tyler Scott target on that play, obviously late in the game there, because you've got Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, DJ Moore, and Tyler Scott all in pattern. There are 4 guys that are running a play, and the first read of that play is your top receiver, DJ Moore, running a crosser underneath from the right side of the formation, a bunch formation with Cole and Darnell. And if the coverage dictates it, the ball goes to DJ, and perhaps you hit a completion that gets you a first down that then seals the game for you. Remember, one of the plays that I starred in my rewatch, David, was it wasn't quite a check down, but it was an underneath route to DJ Moore, 8 yards short of the sticks in the 3rd quarter. No, it was early in the 4th quarter. And you remember this one where DJ Moore fights for
3rd and 12. 3rd and 12. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And it's well short of the sticks where it's completed. And it's one of those moments where you go, okay, that's why you pay DJ Moore. That's why you invest in DJ Moore. That's why you sent the draft capital you did to Carolina. So you try to get that guy the ball in game on the line situations. But Justin made a good decision throwing it to Tyler Scott, and he made a good throw. And now this is a guy that you've drafted. Conceivably, I said to Bigsy after the game on Sunday evening, it's a route Chase Claypool probably could have run, right? Well, Chase Claypool wasn't what you thought he was. And so now you're still trying to fortify your receiving core in a way that gives you guys that can make those plays in the moment. Remember, Tyler Scott has been playing receiver for 3.5 years in his football life. He was a running back until he got into college, and then he made the transition at Cincinnati to receiver, and he's still learning the nuances of the position. And it showed up in a major way on Sunday with him unable to smoothly run through that ball and catch it. The bigger issue to me here is what you brought up about Montez Sweat. I still have to go back through and see on the Lions' final 2 touchdown drives which plays and how many plays Sweat was off the field for, because that's go time, right? That's closing time. That's game-winning time. And when you have just given away a 2nd-round draft pick, when you have opened up the vault and given a guy a $96 million contract, when you have made it very clear that you believe in him to be a star of your football team, he better be in there at closing time. Again, I don't have the numbers. You gave just the total numbers of 39 to 62. That's not enough when you compare it to the star pass rusher of the Lions, Aiden Hutchinson, as Mark Potash did to Matt Eberflus on Monday afternoon, who played 69 of 75 snaps. That's 92% of snaps. And Matt said, we want to keep fresh bodies. We have this platoon system. Travis Smith, the defensive line coach, handles the substitutions. We want to flow it through. Not good enough, man. Like you heard me when they made the investment in Montez Sweat say, okay, well, guess what? Now he's got to be an every half difference maker for your football team. And 39 out of 63 snaps is not enough. And it's not a valid explanation for you to say, we want to keep fresh bodies out there when your defense was on the football field for 19 minutes and 36 seconds of an NFL game in 2023. Yeah, sure, there's going to be moments where you need a quick blow, but like, my God, like it wasn't like the defense was gassed and they had been on the field all afternoon. Have your best player out there. The sack that Montez Sweat made, difference-making play. He totally took Jared Goff by surprise with his closing speed, and it was a huge play in that game. Those plays need to be made more often. The only way they're made is if the guy's on the field.
So a couple of things that were obvious in looking at the game a little bit again was that we don't have to go through necessarily the 3-down sequence where included a 3rd down pass to Tyler Scott, but the first 2 carries were to Khalil Herbert. Dan, I don't know if I speaking of the running backs, Khalil Herbert did not look like the runner he was before the injury. Deontay Foreman looked like he was running hurt, and then he got hurt again. And Roschon Johnson stood out to me only because on 3rd and 7, the Bears handed him the ball rather than before it preceded the second field goal. And that was the play that Jared Goff cited when he said basically, well, if they're going to run the ball on 3rd down, we're going to take advantage. And they're telling us that, they don't think they can beat us or finish us off. And so I'm thinking about the running back experience, and none of it was good. And I think, I don't know if Foreman's going to be healthy. I don't know if I trust Herbert anymore. And Roschon Johnson so far has not necessarily distinguished himself. So I'm just like from a running back perspective, on a day that David Montgomery got the last laugh and spiked it in the end zone to celebrate the game-winning touchdown, not a good development.
Well, I said this earlier today. Deontay Foreman's last carry of the football game came with 12:24 to play in the 3rd quarter, and then he re-aggravates the ankle injury and doesn't get back in the football game after that. And I thought they really missed him, especially in a game like that where you're trying to grind it out at the end, where you're trying to get really rugged 4-yard carries to move a defense and move the chains. And they just didn't have that. I think you're right in saying that Khalil Herbert didn't look like himself. I think that's something we have to follow up with the coaching staff about as this week goes along to try to figure out why they think that was the case. Obviously, his first game back after a long layoff and the injury that he suffered in Washington wasn't pretty, but that it didn't help, right? Like you just need the tough yards, and they weren't able to get them. That was an issue, and you've got to figure out a way to get that regrouped, because the depth of this position is supposed to be a strength of your football team. And it's supposed to give you the opportunity to lean into it. You're a top 5 rushing attack in the NFL coming into the week, and you should be able to lean into that in game deciding moments. The Lions obviously finished the game pretty well, and you mentioned the David Montgomery final touchdown, but they weren't world beaters on the ground yesterday. Montgomery 76 yards on the ground. Jahmyr Gibbs 36. Some gash runs in there, and you were able to obviously control the Lions offense by keeping them off the field for a long stretch. But man, like this is a football team, David, that just like they're just not there yet, and it's really frustrating because they should be further along than they are.
Looking at the numbers, and you have to feel pretty good about Justin Fields' efficiency as we pivot to the quarterback conversation.
Yeah.
Dan, I want to know, like 169 yards passing, as we have said in the past, that number's got to be higher. And there are a lot of factors, but I found myself after this game with him having 104 yards rushing and only 169 yards passing, as much as people want to focus on that and about his limitations, didn't bother me as much because I think it would all fit into the context of the game plan. Until the Lions were going to find a way to stop Justin Fields using his legs, why would there be any reason to ask him to stop running the way that he did? So I didn't have a big problem with that. I'm just curious, in the 24 hours or so after the game, as you talked about the game and heard people discuss it or analyze it, did the Bears passing attack, what did you think of that, and what do you think of those numbers?
Yeah, look, I've ragged on their passing incompetence for a couple years, right? And how little productivity they've had at points. Yesterday's didn't bother me even an ounce. I thought that they were playing that game on their terms. I thought that they were using the read option very well. I thought they got Justin out on some designed runs with 3 quarterback sweeps that got him out on the edge a little bit. I think he ended up with 45 yards on keepers on the read option. scrambles for 50 yards in the game, including the 29-yarder that we can get into in a minute because it included the little dance at the end of it, which is probably an entry point into another discussion. But look, like I thought he threw the ball well all afternoon. On my rewatch, I'm putting question marks next to the plays, X's next to the yikes plays, and hearts next to the plays I loved, and there are far more hearts on my little initial grade sheet than there were question marks or X's. It was really good all day. He made good decisions. He threw the ball well. I thought his pocket awareness was really good. I thought he did a good job of moving around the pocket and keeping his eyes up and making throws. Like, this was one of Justin's best performances as a pro quarterback. If you could replicate this for the next month, we start to change the conversation about what the offseason holds. And ultimately, that passing offense become more dynamic. But for what the game was yesterday, I thought they did a pretty good job, and I thought Justin managed it really well.
Okay, I'll continue that for a moment because it is what people are talking about the most on Monday in Chicago about Justin Fields, this 7-game sample size and what it means to his future. And as I said yesterday in Row, I think that, if this was the opening statement of his closing argument, he certainly got all of our attention. And I think that it was very impressive. And I just wonder, though, because of the way that the Bears lost that game and because of some of the realities that might be facing Matt Eberflus and the head coach of the Bears, I wonder if all of this becomes almost a moot point. Because if you do get a new head coach, and if you do have that new head coach bring in either an offensive coordinator or his offensive system, if he's an offensive-minded head coach, then what does that mean to in reality and practicality to Justin Fields? It probably means the Bears are moving on, regardless of how well he plays in the final 7 games. Now, that could be influenced or affected by the front office, but we know how it works. If you get a new head coach, typically that coach is going to have designs on who he likes and what kind of quarterback he's going to want in his system. And it might be a mild surprise if whoever that is, coach to be named later, wants to stay with the status quo and a quarterback with as much baggage, maybe mileage, as Justin Fields will have for whoever the next coach may be.
What do you mean by mileage?
Well, I think that he's been, number one, there could be baggage of being the holdover in Chicago going now with its 3rd head coach.
Sure.
Mileage would be the fact that maybe in year 4 you worry about the toll mentally and physically that it has taken on his body and his mind to embrace and be the leader that the next regime will probably want to or believe in that can win them a Super Bowl.
The points you make are valid, but it's not unheard of for a new coach to inherit a quarterback that they may be intrigued with. Matt Nagy came here because he was intrigued to work with Mitch Trubisky. John Fox got paired up with Jay Cutler. I'm not sure he was coming to Chicago because he really wanted to work with Jay, but you know how it works. And
Sure.
and so I think we've set this up on rational ground here for a long time. This conversation hasn't changed until it changes. And so Justin has 6 more games. If he makes a legitimate breakthrough, it will be obvious to everyone. If it's not obvious to everyone, then what we've talked about for 3 seasons will be sort of the end conclusion, that it just hasn't been enough. There's just not enough there to tell you that you can go win at the highest level with the guy, and so look, like, yeah, there are 6 games and 7 weeks left in the season for this story to change, and it could change. If it doesn't, like, I just think that by the time we get to what will it be, January 8th or whatever day locker cleanout day is, there's not going to be the guessing game that creates this impassioned sports conversation in our city. I think it's just going to be plainly obvious, staring everyone dead in the face. And if it's not staring you dead in the face, I think that's also your answer. You know what I mean? Like, if there is still this gray area, then it tells you that there's still massive gray area.
Well, yeah, I know where you're coming from. I guess I just started thinking about it this morning. I think Mully said something about, Ben Johnson and everybody looks at him as a hot head coaching candidate. We know we're going to hear his name, especially given the success of the Lions. But Dan, I do think that if you don't
and what did Ben Johnson do? He took cast off Jared Goff and turned him into a guy that is playing the best football of his career, right?
But that's kind of my point. Is that okay? So Ben Johnson theoretically takes over whether it's the LA Chargers, the Chicago Bears, whoever is looking for a coach next. I mean, you know that these firings are going to be coming, and the fear or the reality is it's likely to happen in Chicago. When I talk about Justin Fields, I want to be respectful because we just saw him, pretty much dominate the game and be the best player in the field on Sunday at Ford Field. But he is not your conventional NFL quarterback. And if he were, we wouldn't be having this years old conversation about what the Bears are going to do to free him up and do the things that play to his strengths. So I guess that's what I mean is that typically the next genius that you hire to be your head coach is going to have a vision or an image of what that system looks like. Typically, it would be a guy like Jared Goff, who was the number 1 overall pick because he was more a prototypical NFL quarterback coming out of Cal. And so he would be the guy that was like, all right, I can work with him. He's going to be a retread. His second act in Detroit has gone well, largely because of Johnson, but largely because of mistakes and the failure he had in LA. Justin Fields could have a very productive second act. Those second acts happen elsewhere. So I guess that's all I mean is that we could get to the end of the season. Justin Fields could have acquitted himself quite well in these 7 games. The Bears have an entire coaching change that cleans out everybody from the head coach to the offensive staff, etc. And I think the next guy is not going to be as intrigued by Justin Fields as he will be like, well, how can we figure out a graceful exit to this tenure because I want my own guy?
No, I mean it's entirely valid, and it's such a pivotal point in team history because of it, and it's another pivotal point. I feel like we've been at a lot of these pivotal points here in the last 5 years or so, and they're going to have to choose right, and they're going to have to be smart with whatever new additions they make to the football team from the top on down. And the most important roles in a football franchise in the NFL, and it's your general manager, your head coach, and your quarterback, and then your coordinators, and so whatever they do and whatever decisions they make to put them in the right direction at those positions this offseason are huge. They're directional for the franchise. Right now, we're living in the now, and we're living in a day after a game where Justin, as you said, played very well and took a step in the right direction. And now comes the next test. Stack a second consecutive good performance together.
Yep.
Go to Minnesota against the defense that completely frazzled you the first time you played them this year.
Yep.
Knocked you out of the game in the third quarter and caused you to miss 35 days of game action. And go put your best foot forward. Go win a football game, a division football game for the first time since your rookie year and your first home start at Soldier Field. So look, like the tests are there, and now go take them. One of the things about last week, David, that drove me crazy was there was like this one pocket of people arguing that you couldn't really evaluate Justin's rookie season because it came under Matt Nagy, and you couldn't really fairly evaluate him in his second season because they were tanking, and you couldn't really evaluate him in the first 6 games of the year this year because they were kind of figuring themselves out, and you couldn't really take into stock the 4.5 games he missed because he missed the 4.5 games. And so really the only thing that was left was these 7 games, and it was going to be the be-all end-all of the Justin Fields evaluation. My counter argument obviously is that this is like going to college. Like, you have a final exam at the end of the semester that gives you your final grade, but it's not 100% of your final grade. Everything that happened up to that point still counts. Can you raise your grade? Absolutely. Can your grade lower? Absolutely. But so that's what this is. This 7-game stretch is a final exam for Justin Fields in terms of his evaluation and how it will be viewed by Ryan Poles. And again, they have to make the right decision, because you saw the report from Ian Rappaport on Sunday morning that said they would quote unquote have to be blown away to pivot in a new direction this offseason. Well, that felt like a rerun to me, because they said that last offseason, and this is a whole different set of dynamics this year, particularly hinging on how Justin plays over these last 7 games. And I think a lot of people missed the nuance in Ian's story at NFL.com that said, oh, by the way, here's the list of boxes that the Bears want him to check over the last 7 games to truly believe in him. So there's a lot more of this story that needs to play out.
And the pass-fail box that needs to be checked is consistency. That's the one word that was used the most, and I think that's the one that you have harped on, and I think it's the one the Bears will use to determine whether or not to move on, whoever's making that determination. Okay, so back to the game on Sunday, and Justin Fields, 18 carries, 14 design runs, had 104 yards rushing. Dan, I think that it's interesting on a couple things. Number one, The Bears are 0-5 in games that Justin Fields has 100 more rushing yards. I think it has probably more to do with the Bears than it does Justin Fields, because I like the way they played yesterday. I like the way that they got they got the most out of his skill set, because it doesn't bother me the run pass ratio. Is it sustainable? Well, it's got to be until he proves that he's not available for for a game, because the conundrum is he's not going to be the kind of quarterback that is special unless he does these things that allow him to show it. So I wonder, and I asked DJ Moore this, and he didn't have a great sense maybe, but you mentioned the dance, the 30-yard run or 29-yard run, and I think to me all the dance at the end of that said that Justin Fields was feeling it. He was, really in a good place. His confidence was oozing. He was feeling comfortable. And I do think this is unscientific and maybe a little bit meatballish, but I do think that the better Justin Fields runs or performs as a runner, the better he is as a passer. And I think that's why I think it's so important to let him play and be free and not robotic. Even if it's a mental thing, you take advantage of that skill set, because I think they're really related. His legs connected to his arms in a way that I don't know that you can really explain, but I think there is a connection there.
So I'm not going to be the angry old guy and come on here and be like, "Oh my God, what was he doing that dance there in the fourth quarter? It was ridiculous." But what I will say is it almost felt like a premature exhale, which seemed like what the entire team did down the stretch of that game. Like I would prefer for that to come after a scramble that ends in the end zone. I would prefer that to come after a play that basically seals the win. And at that point, it's 23-14. There was a lot of unfinished business left. And so, like I'm not going to, like I said, go on a 15-minute rant about that, but I was more bothered by the sequence that followed that, because the Bears got conservative after that. And it was a Khalil Herbert run for 2 yards, a Justin Fields zone read for 1 yard, and then one to Roshan Johnson for 2 yards. And Matt Eberflus sort of indicated on Monday afternoon, David, that third down run, the 3rd and 7, he saw an opportunity for Justin to keep that football. And he thought there might have been a better opportunity to move the sticks by keeping the ball as the most dynamic player on the field rather than giving it to Roshan Johnson for 2 yards. We saw how that play ended up, and they end up kicking the 39-yard field goal, which gave them the 26-14 lead. By the way, I will reiterate this because people are still confused about the game situation. It was 4th and 5 when they kicked that last field goal to go up 26-14. It was 4th and less than a yard earlier in the quarter when they went up 23-14. But that was one of a handful of sequences in the game that when you go back through it, you're like, that was ultimately catastrophic for you because you didn't land the kill shot when you needed to. And when that run occurs and you get the 29-yard run and you get a penalty tacked onto it and you're down there and you've got a chance to just land the knockout punch, figure out a way. If Justin's feeling it so much that he can dance, then give him a couple plays. Maybe he should have kept it on that third down play. Maybe there's a passing play in there where you find DJ Moore or Cole Kmet, and you just go for the kill shot. But I felt like they kind of got into old Dick Duran mode, which used to drive me insane, where it's like, okay, we're comfortable enough with a lead and we don't want to risk screwing up here. Instead of having that aggressive mindset of like, let's finish this thing off, it was like, let's try to make sure we don't screw this up. And I thought that was just a bad disconnect in the game.
I think that's a good observation. I hadn't thought of it necessarily that way, but that is a good observation. And really, we're not complaining about the dance. I really don't care about what happens after. Yeah, in most cases, I mean that's he's entitled to that. It's an emotional game, but that is an interesting thing. I wonder how the Bears, like, I wonder if coaches look for cues from players like Fields and what kind of day he's having, and I wonder if that affects what kind of game they call based on some of that. I think that's probably no, because I don't think they even know who's in the game half the time, as it turns out. But I do wonder if they're looking for things from their leader to see, what's Justin like today? How's he feeling? Because it would be great. And I think that, Olin Kreutz has mentioned this a couple times on the score. He always references the John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson sequence, which was on NFL Films, and it was a 4th down, and John Harbaugh is overheard or mic'd up and saying, "Hey, what do you like here? What do you like here?" And I don't think we have many examples of Justin Fields connecting with his coaches in that way, which made me openly wonder. And I wasn't trying to be controversial but this morning on the radio, I was wondering, like, so what kind of relationship does Luke Getsy and Justin Fields and Matt Eberflus have? Because all the times that we talk about, well, why don't you ask him what he likes and what he would like in this situation? You don't really see that because is that kind of give and take? Do they have that kind of rapport or relationship? I really don't know.
Yeah, so I answered a similar question to this with the afternoon show, the midday show on 670 The Score on Monday afternoon, and my answer to that is that like I think that the relationship between Justin and Luke has been strong from the start, and I think they have open lines of communication. I think they respect each other's candor, respect each other's honesty, and are always working in a direction where they both know they're about the same things. And the thing that they're about is success for the team, the growth of the individual. And so like, I can't comment on what footage is available of their sideline conversations, but I can promise you it's productive. And like I said earlier today, that I feel like Luke has been made into this boogeyman by a lot of people who are looking for a scapegoat for why the Bears are 3-8 and why they haven't got over the hump. But you look at any measure and you say, like, this has been a team that has run the ball as well as most of the best teams in the league. They have converted on third down at a high rate all season. They've been good inside the red zone. I think I put out a tweet over the weekend that they were one of 3 teams that ranked in the top 10 of those categories. And the other 2 were the 49ers and the Ravens, who are really good football teams. The Bears also put together a game plan yesterday that allowed them to control the ball for more than 40 minutes, allowed them to score points on 6 of their first 8 drives. If Luke Getsy is such a terrible offensive coordinator, then how are they possibly overcoming how terrible he is to have this brand of success? How are they unlocking Justin for a 104-yard rushing day? How is he in a groove after 35 days off to come in and seem like he hadn't missed a beat and get in a flow the first drive of the game? And like you said, like, how do you kind of read a quarterback for how his days are going? There are a lot of days where you can see early, like, oh, Justin's not there. Yesterday, Sunday afternoon, was not one of those days. That flow was there early, and I don't think it ever really dissipated, to be honest with you. There was no prolonged stretches where you're like, okay, he's gotten off track, and it's just gotten clunky here. So I don't know.
I think your numbers about Getsy are interesting, but I do think he's also one of these guys that kind of like, he seems to strike out with the bases loaded a lot, even though he might be hitting 300. I think he's one of these guys that like misses the open 3 or a layup when he might be averaging 17 points a game. I mean, I understand.
I'm just trying to debunk this myth that he's like the sole factor in why the Bears are a bad football team, which has been like, it's been a mushrooming talking point for like 2.5 weeks now.
I know.
And immediately when that game ended yesterday, that's where all the ire went, right? The ire immediately went there. And it was like, do you see that the defense, led by the defensive head coach, gave up 2 touchdowns in the final 4 minutes and 15 seconds, including the first touchdown drive where the Lions went the last 51 yards in 13 seconds.
But I just look at the guy. I just look at it. I know this would be a good. I'm going to come up with a list of like the most vilified offensive coordinators in the last 25 years of Beardom. Well, yeah, I mean he's definitely near the top of that list. I do wonder 2 things. If Luke Getsy gets fired in 4 weeks,
sure,
is he hired in 6? I mean, is he going to get another good job? Is he going to get another bite? Probably he's a coaching life for these guys always resurface, but I wonder in what capacity. I don't know if he, my analogies may not have been the greatest, but I do think he has a tendency to not take what is obvious and to maybe miss those opportunities to do that. So, yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing conversation. I think it probably is going to be a moot point as well, because I don't know that he's going to be somebody that is able to survive this either, because of how bad it is, because the numbers are just going to be too bad for Matt Eberflus to explain away.
This is slightly tangential, but related to the offense, because there were 2 sequences after first half takeaways that I think really hurt the Bears. You go down the field on the first drive of the game, and you score a touchdown. You come back on defense and you get a takeaway, the Tyreek Stevenson interception, and you put together a pretty good drive after that. And it's 1st and 10 at the Lions 38. And you've got a chance to really sink your claws into a game early on the road. And the sequence after that was a run to Deontay Foreman for 6 yards, which looks like Brian Branch had some sort of run blitz on and totally smoked Darnell Mooney right off the snap and took Foreman down for a loss of 6. Now you're behind the sticks. Well, guess what? The next play, DJ Moore runs a post route and it's open, and Justin overshoots him by 3 yards. And everybody post game said, yeah, Justin overcooked that one and he shot it too far and we missed an opportunity to score. And then the last play was a shot over the middle. Even at 3rd and 16 from the 44, you've got a chance to get a chunk back and get into Cairo Santos range because he's been automatic and he's perfect from 50 plus this year. And that play on 3rd and 16 was batted down at the line of scrimmage. And all of a sudden you're punting rather than turning that takeaway into points. You're punting. They got another interception off of Goff from TJ Edwards early in the second quarter. And there were only 3 plays on the next drive. And it was a Justin Fields zone read for -2, actually only 2 plays, then a delay a game, which, as you talked about earlier, was a problematic thing. And then a short pass to Tyler Scott, who then fumbled. You know what I mean? And so, like, there are moments here where you're like, man, like this when you and I spent all of last year about talking about how to learn to win, it's not always just in the fourth quarter. Sometimes early in the game, you have to seize the opportunity to really put a team, back against the ropes. And they didn't do it. And those were 2 moments that I think come back to bite you. In the moment, you're not shouting at the person you're watching the game on, like, oh no, they're doomed. But you go back through it on the rewatch, knowing the end result, and you go, that's a critical lapse offensively that ends up costing you.
That's a clue, right? All right, enough about the offense. Quickly before we get out of here, defensive impressions, defensive disappointments. Jaylon Johnson had a rough day, and Matt Eberflus did nothing to kind of shy away from that reality. He called him a pro. When he talked about him, he was asked about the pass interference. He was asked about missing the pick 6 that went through his hands, and obviously
took exception to that. He said it didn't go through my hands. He said it touched one of my hands, and I was kind of, I wasn't there because I was in with Eberflus and Fields at the time, but I'll push back on that because that, like, when you've spent an entire season propping yourself up as one of the elite corners in the game, and there's an opportunity there to undercut a route and take it 97 yards for a touchdown. You catch that,
you catch that.
It's not going to go in the stats as a drop, but it's a missed opportunity for a guy that wants to get paid top of the market money.
Yeah, you want to get paid $18 million a year. You catch that, and you don't quibble about semantics after a game that you really played poorly. And when he stood out for the wrong reasons, because as I was getting to, those missed interceptions and that pass interference penalty was less galling to me than allowing the 32-yard touchdown pass with 2 veteran guys. They dropped it. Jared Goff drops it right into the basket, right into the hole in cover 2. And that can't happen. And I think that was, to me, as disappointing as any play.
So interesting nugget on that one. I'm with you that it's as disappointing as any play. But Matt Eberflus on Monday afternoon, now I have to go back and rewatch this, seemed to implicate Kyler Gordon in that sequence as the guy who played too low and took a shorter route as instead of staying with Jameson Williams on the sail route there. And so if indeed it was Kyler Gordon's responsibility to have Jameson Williams in that coverage, and instead he broke into a free space in between Eddie Jackson and Jaylon Johnson, we've got to have a different conversation about this, right? Because we gave both those guys a whole lot of guff on Sunday night and again Monday morning for that play. And so I got to go revisit that and see exactly what that looks like from the overhead.
Didn't Eberflus even confirm that after the game?
He didn't have names after the game. He just said we've got to stay high to low in that situation and make sure we're staying with the deeper.
I got to watch that play again.
Then, yeah, right. I know exactly right. Yeah,
it's a very strange.
So that's one where the all 22 is going to be. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be popping up on a Twitter screen near you with people kind of giving Matt's explanation and then showing it from the overhead view to see how that broke down. But that was brutal. That was brutal in a moment where, again, like, that drive was way too quick, David. Like, you're up 12 points at the very least. If you're going to let them score, make it be a long, drawn out, prolonged drive where they got to use time, use timeouts, use energy. The Bears didn't do that. And at that point, you realize that they had left the door wide open.
I know they did leave the door wide open. I'm sorry for this. I'm watching the game. I'm watching the play, Dan. You caught me. I'm watching the play again. 33 is the corner outside. Now, look, I know to the entire call and the defense, but, like, letting Jaylon Johnson off the hook on that, I would want a more full explanation.
Well, you got the play in front of you right now. I don't have it in front of me. Where does Jameson Williams come from? Does he come from the slot?
Jameson Williams. Okay, if I had to watch it again, I just lost it again. He he is. Let's see, lined up. So the Bears are.
We can include this on the Netflix documentary about Beat Reporter. It'll be very entertaining viewing of me watching you watching a video that I can't see.
Okay, I see. Can't see where he lines up exactly. That's a good. We'll get to it in the next pod. I'm pretty sure he's lined up wherever he's lined up. This is
Yeah, I
okay.
mean, you're a DB by trade, so you should have
No,
a
I'm
good eye.
telling you
Good
this.
eyes
I'm
on this.
telling you. Some of the principles are so where he's lined up. Jaylon Johnson has a decision to make as he gets broken down his cushion, and I just don't know he made the right one. And bottom line is Eddie Jackson didn't do enough to come off his hash mark and his landmark to the point where he's a spectator. It was a bad look for two guys that you
Yeah.
should trust in the situation. Where Kyler Gordon fits into this, I'm intrigued by, and I do want to see another angle because Kyler Gordon didn't get enough depth, but maybe it's a domino effect. Flusy may be saying if Gordon got more depth, Jaylon Johnson wouldn't have felt as threatened, and then he could have come off quicker, and then Eddie Jackson would have done it too. But you know what? Total breakdown, touchdown Lions, end of game.
Well, yeah, touchdown Lions. The second touchdown was the David Montgomery one to seal it in the final minute, and so I wanted to bring this back up because we talked about it Sunday evening, and friend of the podcast Kevin Fishbane was able to ask a couple of my questions that I couldn't get in from 32,000 feet on the flight from Detroit to Chicago. And I was curious about the timeout usage there after they hit the draw play to Jahmyr Gibbs to set up 1st and goal from the 1. And I obviously know why the Bears are calling the timeout there. They're trying to preserve time for their offense to have a response. But given that the Lions had no timeouts left, part of me wonders, do you just let that play out? Do you try to catch the Lions in such a hurry up, frantic state that they make a mistake, that they rush up to the line, maybe commit a false start penalty, maybe, fumble a snap or get a little bit helter skelter there with the way the game is going there? It's a tough call to make. Matt was asked about that, and he said, well, certainly they had time to still run another play if we elected to run the clock. Well, yeah, obviously. But if things get a little frantic and wild there, maybe you get a gift from them. I was just curious where you came down on that, because in the moment I felt like, man, why did they allow this reset here for 1st and goal from the 1? And I think your point was, well, maybe now they're just going to let them score. and maybe that was part of the MO there. But
I don't know if that was part of the MO there. I think it crossed my mind because they only had 29 seconds left, and it was almost inevitable that they were going to score at that point, and you wanted to leave yourself a little bit more time. It was a confusing explanation, and it never got any sort of clarity from Matt Eberflus in that. So I don't know that the Bears had a clear strategy.
And so the reason I bring it up is because sometimes the lack of clear strategy is crystal clear at some point. It's like, are you ready for these moments? And do you, as a coaching staff that's been so situationally prepared for everything, why does it always seem to wind up with us talking about a loss, 28 times out of, or 22 times out of 28 games?
Let me ask you about another thing that could have a crystal clear explanation next time you talk to Luke Coryell up there at Hallis. So when you have 29 seconds to go,
that's two low blows on the same time.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's Monday. When you have 29 seconds to go, 75 yards, or not even that, but you're looking for a field goal. Why in the world would you not at least give some help to your right tackle, the rookie trying to block Aiden Hutchinson, who is the one guy on that defense you should know where he is on every single snap? You don't keep in Mercedes Lewis or Cole Kmet or a running back. You don't give your rookie offensive tackle any help. And you know what Aiden Hutchinson did? He did what he's expected to do, what he's paid handsomely, will be paid handsomely to do. He strip sack fumbled, created the safety, kicked the ball into the stands, and he'll gladly pay the fine because the Bears decided no help on that play, or they're going to let him go it alone, and they paid the price.
Well, look, you've got to cover 40 yards and probably what? You're going to have maybe at most 4 snaps before you get a kick. And so you're going to have to get chunks here. And part of chunks require leaving some of your better players to handle their responsibilities. Darnell Wright is a top 10 pick who is going to be in this league for a very long time with the express purpose of being able to block the other team's best rusher.
Not yet.
Well, okay. Well, he shouldn't need help all the time, and particularly in a situation where you need to get as many guys down the field as possible to try and create some situation. I don't have a problem with him being singled up there.
I do.
I have a problem with him putting up zero resistance on that particular pass set, and Justin being completely vulnerable to getting strip sacked, and then the ball's out. And honestly, the kick out the back of the end zone was the worst thing for the Bears because now it's a free kick and the game's over. So it is what it is, and yeah, I can't go there with a top 10 pick and be like, why can't you give the top 10 pick more help?
There's one guy in that defense that it's like letting all these basketball analogies. I must be watching too much NBA. It's like if you have one guy that can beat you, your best scorer, you don't double team him on the last possession where he can do the most damage. Aiden Hutchinson wrecked the game because the Bears rolled out the red carpet to the pocket and said, go ahead, beat our guy, win the game.
I'm trying to find Hutch in the stat sheet here yesterday. He had 1 sack. That was it.
Okay.
And no other quarterback hits. So where was the game wrecking?
He's one guy. He's a game wrecker.
Where was the game wrecking that you're speaking of? It seems like Darnell Wright held him in check pretty much.
Are you an Ohio State graduate or something?
The entire afternoon
is the real deal.
I know he's the real deal, but Darnell Wright has also had a really impressive start to his rookie season and was doing a pretty good job on the guy.
Okay.
I mean, like that feels like we're nitpicking with 29 seconds to go and a lot of ground to cover. You're going to run max protect and want to run a one deep route against a prevent defense. That's going to be your play there.
Simple question, simply answered. All right. Anything else that we need to get to before I issue out any more low blows?
No, this is our last episode before Thanksgiving, so I'm very thankful that this podcast continues to have the passionate following that it has. It continues to have the flexibility of my co-host and my producer to put up with my random scheduling changes and chaos. So that's my way of saying thanks at the end of this podcast.
No, you're welcome. Did you say ranting schedule changes or random?
Well, random ranting schedule changes. You never know when the next rant's coming, and if you keep taking these low blows,
I know
at Luke Getsy, there might be a bigger rant here yet.
I'm baiting you. Yeah, no, thank you for everyone for listening because it has been a fun year, even despite the losing. But this is an unusual week, and we will be back on Friday afternoon after the holiday, and then we'll of course have our Monday is a Monday night football game, so it's a different schedule next week. Just stay tuned for programming changes.
Yeah, the Monday night game actually allows the Bears to go dark on Thursday, on Thanksgiving Day, which has never happened in my time here. They obviously have played on Thanksgiving Day quite a few times in Detroit and once in Green Bay during my time on the beat. But this is actually a no Bears Thanksgiving for me for the first time in a long time. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I know, because the first time, Dan, that the Bears don't ruin your Thanksgiving, you're like, it's my favorite holiday ever.
I can start drinking a lot earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than the third quarter, as opposed to that. You and Biggsy breaking into the keg. Yeah. All right. So, all right, that was a good one. We will be back later this week. Hope everybody has a happy Thanksgiving. For Adam Sadzinski and Dan Wiederer, I'm David Haugh. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast and watching us on the 670 Scores YouTube page. We will talk to you next time. Happy Thanksgiving.
Great talk. See you out there.